Hi, my name is David Southard from Wild Arena, and I want to talk to you about external monitoring for photographers. We're all accustomed to digital cameras displaying images and information on their rear screens. Now, historically, this would have been for the review of images after we had taken them. But with the advent of live view on mirrored SLR cameras, and of course more recently with mirrorless cameras, we're now able to see what the camera is shooting as we are taking pictures. As part of the development of our cameras, most now have an integrated HDMI port on the side, and this enables us to attach an external screen or monitor. And what most cameras will do is essentially replicate anything that was displayed on the integrated rear screen of the camera itself onto that external monitor or screen for us to see. So how does this work? Well, if we have an HDMI port that is then connected to an external monitor or screen, the information that would have been displayed on the camera's integrated rear screen will be pushed out through that HDMI port onto the external monitor or screen for us to see. Now, with traditional mirrored SLRs, we do have to engage that live view function for the camera to generate a continuous feed off of the sensor for us to therefore monitor externally. But with more modern mirrorless SLRs, that function happens continuously anyway. Sometimes we might choose to connect our cameras with that HDMI port to a TV-styled external screen, perhaps in a setting like the studio we're in now. But there are also available much smaller battery-operated field monitors that we can use anywhere to help us see what is happening with our cameras. So now we know how we can externally monitor, it might be worth taking a moment just to review why we might wish to do so. So here are 5 nice ideas for photographers. Firstly, we can see what the camera is doing, even if the camera is in an awkward position, perhaps particularly high or particularly low. Secondly, we can see what the camera is doing, even if we're not close to it. Thirdly, we get the opportunity to preview whether our intended images are going to be correctly focused and indeed correctly exposed. Fourthly, upon review, we get to see the shots that we have been taking on a larger, brighter and potentially higher quality screen. And finally, we get to more easily share those images as we're taking them in the field with other people too. In addition to these features, external monitors can also be extremely useful if we are using our SLR cameras to shoot video. Some external monitors will be able to overlay information onto our shots that will really help us improve the accuracy of the images that we are creating. Things like focus peaking or focus assist to make sure the focus is very accurate, and then things like waveform monitors, false colors, vector scopes, those kind of things to ensure very accurate exposures. Now, those kind of monitoring features are normally only available on really top-end video cameras. On top of all of these benefits, Atomos are able to combine high-quality monitoring features with the ability for the external monitor to also record the video signal that we are pushing in via the HDMI cable. And this opens up another whole world of possibilities in terms of improved quality. So we've already overviewed what external monitoring is and what the key benefits of it might be for photographers. So what we would like to do today is just run through how we can easily set this up and what the variation in operation might be between different types of camera. So let's begin by recapping on the general ideas of connecting our external monitors to our cameras through the camera's HDMI port. Now, what will normally happen is the external monitor will replicate everything that the camera would have had on its internal rear screen, either with camera generated information or indeed without. From the point of view of a photographer, it's probably a good idea to just run through the two main types of camera we are likely to be using when we want to connect external monitors, and just to outline the difference in their setup for successful operation. Firstly, with traditional mirrored SLRs, the rear screens are normally only used for providing information as we're shooting or for reviewing information and pictures once we've taken them. And of course, if we have an external monitor connected via HDMI, both of those things should be pushed through to the external monitor. But if we engage our camera's live view function, then we are able to see what the camera is looking at as we are shooting, and that information will be relayed up through the HDMI cable to our external monitors. A mirrored SLR's live view function works by forcing the camera's mirror up, opening the shutter, allowing the light to come in and hit the sensor, and therefore enabling the sensor to generate literally a live view feed of what the camera is pointed at, the scene in front of it. Now, normally that live view feed is displayed on the integrated rear screen of the camera, but if we have an external monitor connected via HDMI, of course we are seeing that on the external monitor too. Now, you should bear in mind, in live view mode, it's possible that things like your camera's autofocus operation may not work in quite the same way, and you may drain your camera's batteries more quickly. But fundamentally, with live view engaged, we are now able to externally monitor the world as the camera sees it as we are shooting pictures. As a quick additional point, if you don't want your external monitoring to time out, you may need to adjust the camera's standby times in the main menu. You may also need to decide whether you wish to externally monitor your camera's live view feed with or without the camera's overlaid information. And this may mean that you will need to check the settings on your camera's main menu, on the display settings, or in the information settings, just to get that output set up in the way that you want to use it. Mirrorless cameras should be even easier to set up because we won't need to force them into live view mode as we have had to do with the mirrored cameras. Of course, the way that mirrorless works is the sensor is generating a continuous live signal anyway, so that you can run your electronic viewfinder and show the image on the integrated rear screen. Just with the mirrored SLRs, we do need to check and see what our screen is doing in terms of information overlay, so that we know that that will be replicated over the HDMI connection to our external monitor. If you're not sure if your camera generates a full resolution, clean output through HDMI, then check in the settings in the menu, or refer to the instruction manual, or indeed check with the manufacturer. As a final important thought in terms of connectivity and setup, we need to make sure we are using the right HDMI cables. Now, there are two things to consider. Firstly, the port that our camera will have, whether it is full-size HDMI, mini HDMI, or micro HDMI. And of course, we need to make sure that that's going to connect through to our external monitor with the correct fitting too. We should also make sure that our HDMI cables are up to date, for example 2.0 or 2.1. Even in a world where autofocus is the norm, there may still be occasions when we need to or wish to take control of focus manually. Now, with traditional mirrored cameras, that optical viewfinder can sometimes make that job quite difficult. It helps if we can force the picture onto the rear screen by using a live view function, and this will be made even better if we can take that live view function up to an external monitor through that HDMI connection, so that we can see what's happening on a larger, brighter screen. This can be improved still further by an information overlay on the external monitor called focus peaking or focus assist. In simple terms, this adds a distinct colour fringing around the areas of the image that are sharp or sharply focused, making it really easy to see at a glance which parts of the image are going to be focused for the resulting shot. Image exposure can also be an area where we may at times wish to take control, and judging the results of exposure can also be really tricky. If we take that external feed up onto our monitor, then we can again add an information overlay that can really help us judge that accurately. Histograms and their video equivalent of waveform monitors are a great way of us looking at the data that sits behind the exposure, making sure that our exposures are absolutely where we want them to be. This can particularly be useful when we are guarding against problems like overexposed highlights in our images. For video shooting, external monitors also add some really professional information overlays to help us, normally only found on quite high-end video cameras. These will show us what's happening in terms of our exposure totally with a luminance value, but also with things like colour channels too. The continuous nature of video means that our exposures are dynamic and can change during the duration of the shot. And features like a waveform monitor will give us a live lateral readout of our luminance levels, our exposure, as the shot is being created. And this can be really useful in terms of precisely managing where your highlights and your shadows sit within the total exposure for the whole shot. external monitors have other features too, like an RGB parade, which is a live exposure readout that shows you the luminance levels within the 3 principal colour channels. And this can really help us get an idea of how exposure within colour in the scene also sits, and therefore we can record it accurately. And other more common video displays, such as false colour, when we can ask our external monitor to show us our image literally as a series of false colours representing different tonal values within the scene, as well as specialised displays like vector scopes. Videographers will often set their cameras up to shoot their images in a deliberately low contrast format, sometimes described as a log profile or a log setting. And this can be really useful in terms of just helping to control the contrast range, the highlights and the shadows in our resulting images. Of course, it does mean that when we look at those pictures on the rear screen of the camera or on our external monitor, they will look fairly unattractive and won't give you a sense of what that picture would look like once it has been edited or graded. The external monitor can again help this with a simple overlay which applies some changes to that picture just so you can understand what it will look like once it's been through the editing process. That's using a simple feature called LUTs, LUTs or lookup tables. So how does a LUT or lookup table work on our external monitor? Well, the monitor will take the picture out of the camera via the HDMI connection, and then it will preview that picture in terms of its values, its exposure, its contrast and its colour. If we switch the LUT on, it can convert those values to show you or preview what that image will look like once it has been edited or processed. Now, LUTs are available in many different forms, and it's simply a question of choosing one that is appropriate for your camera, how it is set up and what your intended output will be, and then loading that LUT onto the monitor. Because the LUT is just an overlay, we can of course switch that on and off, enabling us to see what the picture is actually like as it is shot and what it will look like once it has been edited or graded. In this camera we are shooting on Canon log, a low contrast format, and then previewing it for standard TV output with Rec 709. Externally recording video signals is a complicated subject with many varied options depending on the make and model of the external monitor and recorder you're using, and of course the specifications of the camera. The basic idea though is the camera will output a full resolution clean signal through the HDMI cable, which we can then record externally on the monitor. What's interesting about this is at that point the quality options are potentially governed by the capabilities of the external recorder and not necessarily the limitations of the camera. To understand these benefits, it might be worth taking a moment just to run through how video signals are recorded in the first place. We could simplify this down into the following thoughts. Firstly, what quantity and breadth of information do we expect our video file to contain in terms of things like resolution, colour depth, etc. Secondly, there is the question of how we compress this information down to make it space efficient and then uncompress or decompress it when we open the file. This process of compression and decompression is usually abbreviated down to the codec. Lastly, what file format do we use to bundle this information into, often described as the wrapper? The file format can dictate what software is capable of opening or reading the file so that we can use it afterwards. Now, usually these settings are altered by the user, Depending on what quality our cameras are capable of producing and what options we have available for recording this signal within the device. In simple terms, if we split these functions out and record the video signal externally, we are very likely to have more options and ultimately be capable of delivering higher quality images. Of course, all of this will depend on your camera and what options your external recorder and monitor may have, but the differences can be quite significant. Beyond all of this, there might be other simple benefits too, like the external recorder taking higher capacity and more cost-effective storage like SSDs. We might also benefit by being able to record for longer without our devices timing out or overheating. We've previously talked about the benefits of external monitoring in terms of pictures, but audio is an important part of video shooting, and these devices can help you with audio too. As audio is also carried through the HDMI connection up to your external monitor, you can monitor both picture and audio strength on your external monitor screen with an audio meter. Now, you can of course do this on the camera's integrated rear screen, but the larger size of the external monitors can help you view multiple pieces of information all simultaneously. If your external monitor can also record, of course you can monitor audio on that embedded signal as you're shooting as well. In addition to that, Atomos products will have a headphone jack, so you can monitor that way too, and there may be a 3.5mm jack socket to accept an analog 2-channel audio signal as well. Within Atomos devices, there may also be free and paid activation and upgrade options which will expand the functionality of the device. This may include things like DNX recording, ProRes RAW, H.265, RAW over SDI with an SDI module, and recording up to 8K resolution with certain cameras. Atomos may also periodically update the device's firmware too, and this may also improve its functionality.